sons. Tonight, you have learned the final and greatest truth of the ninja. That ultimate mastery comes not of the body, but of the mind.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. I've got a friend of the channel, Mark Pellegrini. He loves all things TMNT. I guess he noticed a couple conversations we were having about comic book collecting, and he wanted to talk about some price gouging as far as the TMNT, vintage TMNT comics is that you could probably find in your dollar bin a couple of years ago are quite a bit more nowadays. And here with me from, is it TMNT? What was the website? TMNT
my old
Entity.
website?
Yes.
Yeah, the one. Yep. So it's great to be back and talking about Turtles, which is my wheelhouse. But this was just something that I listened to that recording you did last week with your bud talking about just how people are collecting comics, any comics, all the comics, and then just pricing them like like they were printed on $100 bills or something. And I noticed a lot of that happening, particularly with Ninja Turtle comics, specifically the Mirage and Archie books from the 80s and early 90s. These books that, like you said, were in dollar bins a year or two ago are now just going for like 50, 60, sometimes several $100s loose.
It's crazy because you think about that Mirage run. Obviously, the first prints are very rare, at least up until issue 4 or 5, I think it is. And they started going up once I think the cartoon probably started coming online. But like the first prints are like 3,000. Those should be really hard to find. They're rare and they're extremely influential. You got movies that have been developed off of that property. You've got all kinds of cartoons, video games, board games, everything. Your backpack shirts. You know, TMNT is an enormous brand. So you imagine those first prints of Mirage are going to be extremely rare, extremely expensive.
Now those, those I completely understand. I mean, I've got, so just to cite my sources, back in the 80s, Mirage published this book called Turtle Mania Special, which has their list of their print runs for everything they published up to that point, which was TMNT number 7. So that's where I'm getting my data from for the number of copies that were printed for each issue. But a TMNT number 1, first printing, 3,000 copies. So yeah, that one's hard to find. Second printing, 6,000 copies. Third printing, 35,000 copies. And that's why there's such a big price jump, price de-escalation between the second and third printing. And yeah, those are rare. But though I have a memory where I just kind of want to shoot myself. It was at a comic book convention in the 90s, and I was flipping through the back issues at some dude's table. And he had all these like second and third printings of TMNT 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those are the ones that go for a lot now because their price, their print runs were lower. And I was flipping through them, and I saw them, and I looked at the guy at the table like, "Oh, why are these in here? They're worth a lot, aren't they?" And he's like, "Nah, they're the second and third printings. They're not worth anything." And I was like, "Oh, okay, if they're not worth anything." So I ignored them, and I was looking specifically for like back issues of the Max at the time. I wasn't collecting Ninja Turtle comics, so that guy just had a long box full of second and third printings that now on eBay, even a third printing of Ninja Turtles number 1 goes for a few $100.
Yeah, 5.0 TMNT number 1 third printing on eBay is $700. A 9.8 is $7,700. Obviously, very expensive.
And those are for the third printing, and one of them that 5.0, that's a pretty low grade to be selling for $700.
Average grade.
Yeah, I guess it's for a well-read comic, but yeah, I mean that was a book like back then. Your friend was on that video you did last week was talking about how he bought Amazing Fantasy number 15 in the 70s for $500, and he was glad he did because fast forward a few decades, he could use it as a down payment on his house. Like now, I'm like, wow, I wish I had that foresight to buy those back issues of TMNT in the 90s. But those, I understand them being valuable because they're, even if it's the third print, it still has a semi-low print run of 35,000 copies. But once you start getting into like TMNT number 5 and TMNT number 6, those are 60,000 copies, and they didn't even. And number 5 did get a second print run, and so did number 6 and 7. But the second print runs are actually rarer than the first print runs. So if someone tries to sell you a first printing of TMNT number 7 more than whatever the second printing is worth, they're actually kind of cheating you because the second one's rarer. But TMNT number 7, 95,000 copies. TMNT number 8 is over 100,000 copies. That's the one that has the crossover with Dave Sims' Cerebus, the Aardvark. And after that, it's several 100,000 copies per issue. By the time you're getting to like TMNT number 25 and 26, the Rick Veitch issues, that book's like it's 200,000 or 300,000 copies. They're not rare, and they were priced accordingly for the longest time. You could find Volume 1 Mirage comics like between the 20s and like the 50s in back issue bins for $1 because that's what they're worth. They're just printed on newsprint. There's several 100,000 copies of each out there in the wild. But that was like a year or two ago, and I've noticed that they've disappeared from back issue boxes and all found their way onto the walls, above the back issues where all like the comic owners put like what they consider valuable books. And I'm seeing like Ninja Turtles number 26 up there, like on the wall, like priced for like $55. And it's not even a very handsome copy of number 26. Like that book was $1 bin, like dust builder for a year for like last year. Now it's like, oh, but it's a Turtles book from the 80s and early 90s. So bam, stamp it with, like $50 or $60 when it's not worth that.
Yeah, it's crazy the way that the market's fluctuated. We might be seeing some softening specifically with these kind of books where, yes, they're important because of the brand that's on them, but people are forgetting about the rarity of the thing. And once, like you said, once you start getting out of those early, first 7 issues, or even the first, 5 or 6, they're not really all that rare anymore. And these aren't like golden age comics where you're expecting them to turn to dust by now.
Right. I mean, it's also obviously demand plays a part. People want to collect the classic Ninja Turtle books, but it used to be the easiest place to start was like those number 20s through number 50s if you're trying to build your Mirage collection, because they're like $1 or $2 each. And if you wanted to go a little earlier, like TMNT number 8, even though it was like 100,000 copies, you would have to pay like $5 or $6 for it, but it wasn't bad. And there were 4th and 5th printings of like TMNT number 1 and TMNT number 2 that you could get for a song. Those are going for crazy prices now. The TMNT number 2, like 3rd printing, I've seen on eBay going for something insane like $50. Like I bought that. It's the cheap one, the worthless one, but not anymore. One of our local comic shops, Kapow, I was talking to them, and I asked them when I went in to visit, like, oh, do you have, where are your Mirage Turtle books in the back issues? Because I couldn't find them. I was like, oh, we don't have any Mirage issues in the back issues anymore. We only have IDW stuff. I'm like, oh, what happened? And it's like, oh, well, every time we get more Mirage Turtles in, we have these collectors come by, and they just buy all of them up. Sight unseen. Like, you got Mirage Turtles? Like, yes. And so they just buy the whole stack of them. And they're going and they're just putting them up on eBay. It doesn't matter what it is. They're
even the 25th anniversary reprint it's like $10. What the hell?
I know. I have that too. I remember getting that, and the free comic book day one that came around the same time was, it's ridiculous. Now, what's funny is that it's the issues that have 200,000 or 300,000 copies out there that are being price gouged, the ones that aren't rare. Meanwhile, the issues that actually do have extremely low print runs and are hard to find, you can find for a lot cheaper. If you get to like the tail end of TMNT Volume 4 or Tales of the TMNT Volume 2, the ones that are being published around mid-2000s, when nobody was really reading Mirage Turtle comics anymore or even aware that the book was out and still existed, those things have like 10,000 copies, maybe less, per print run, especially when you get towards the end of those runs. But you can still find them for max like $20-$30 for like the ones that are deeper into the series or like a number 1 or 2, or if it's like the middle of the series, you can find them for like $1. Nobody really wants them. The IDW books, those things, even the ones that are being printed right now, are being printed at phenomenally shorter print runs than those Mirage books that everybody wants, that everybody's being price gouged for. And you can find a lot of IDW books in the dollar bins these days because nobody wants them.
Yeah, we got the Venus de Milo returning book, so you might want to get that one. That might be worth somebody. What's the pink turtle that's in there now?
Oh God, I can't. So they're trying to do their female Ghostbusters team for the Turtles. So they've got Jenica, they've got Venus, they've got, what's the other one's name? I can't remember. They're trying to just create 4 female Ninja Turtles so that they can have a girl turtle team. I guess they're going to spin it off maybe into their own book. That's fine. I haven't kept up as much with IDW just because the book got so bad. But like IDW, about 5 or 6 years ago, they had tie-in books for the Nickelodeon cartoon. Lita, that's her name. Thank you. I can't ever remember.
If that first appearance of Lita, there's probably like 18,000 comics printed of that.
Well, I have noticed that people are getting sly about Ninja Turtle keys, and nobody ever, because Ninja Turtle comics, they weren't like X-Men or Spider-Man, so the idea of keys for character first appearances never really seemed to be a thing back in the day. It never seemed to affect prices. So like I noticed if you go on eBay and you look up Tales of the TMNT Volume 1, right? Someone might have issue number 1 up for a high price, even though that's not really an important book. It's just the first issue. But TMNT Tales of the TMNT number 6, first appearance of Leatherhead, and number 4, first appearance of the Rat King. People are actually paying attention now that those characters make their first appearances in those issues, and those are being priced accordingly, when before they just got thrown into the quarter bin with all the other dusty books that nobody wanted. Now suddenly, if you've got a first appearance of Leatherhead or the Rat King, that's might go for some money.
It's crazy. You think about like when TMNT went over to Archie, and it no longer looked like TMNT anymore. It looked like the cartoon. And
yeah.
What is it? TMNT Adventures.
Yeah.
Those are even like $40. Like what?
And that's the really surprising thing. If you think 100,000 copies for a black and white indie book sounds like a lot, like Archie producing newsstand edition comics in the 80s, like that's like probably 1 million copies per issue. Maybe not 1 million, but several 100,000 copies for print runs. And they did multiple print runs, which a lot of people don't realize in those Archie books, was because they were just churning those things out. And they're Archie books for the newsstand inexpensively in the early 90s. They're practically on newsprint. They're really low quality. But yeah, even now, like if you got there's 2 different TMNT adventures. Number 1, there's the miniseries that adapted the first season of the cartoon, and then the first issue of the ongoing one. And I've noticed that a lot of people pricing these things on eBay, they don't know which is which. Like, oh, I've got a TMNT Adventures number 1, so they're like putting like $100 on it, when that book probably has like 500,000 copies out there. It's not rare, but they don't know which number 1 they've got. So you've got to be, somewhat aware of to which one you're getting.
Is the turtle community aware? Are they being taken for a ride on here? Or
I've seen,
over on coming in and not knowing any better.
Yeah, over on the forums, I've noticed people pointing it out, like, what's going on? I can't they're noticing. That's actually kind of one of the things that I thought it was crazy for a while, seeing all these books getting price gouged. But then I started seeing other turtle fans pointing it out and noticing it too. I was like, maybe there really is a trend right now, and. Yeah, when the owner of Kapow told me that, yeah, we've got a guy who just comes in and buys stacks of Mirage books if we ever get them in, and then he goes and flips them on eBay for insane prices. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be the Rick Veitch River trilogy, which that was the number 1 book that you would find in the quarter bins in terms of Mirage comics, and it's gone for like $20 now. I kind of hope that I'm not influencing or motivating people to do this as some sort of money-making venture.
This is a warning. Do not be taken for a ride.
They're not worth it. The comics are worth as much as you want them to be as a collector. I understand that. So the person who wants to fill a hole in their Mirage run, might be willing to pay $50 for TMNT number 25. Knowing full well that it's not worth that much money, but got to fill that hole, got to do it somehow. But I feel like this is a bubble that's probably going to burst eventually, or at least it's going to start leaking. These people are going to be sitting on these stacks and stacks of, frankly, worthless black and white newsprint indie comics that have 200, 300,000 copies per issue. And they're going to be sitting on them for a while and wondering why they can't sell them for $50, why they can't sell them for $20 each. And then their prices are going to go back down to something reasonable, but never, I don't think they'll ever go back down to what they used to be, where you could buy them for $0.25, where you could get 5 issues for $1 from the back issue bin. I don't think we're ever going to see the Turtle comics doing that again, except for the IDW cartoon tie-in books that absolutely nobody wants. And those things were printed at 4,000 or 5,000 copies per issue because nobody wanted them. Retailers weren't ordering them. Those are actually really rare. The TMNT New Animated Adventures and Amazing Adventures. But you'll still find them in dollar bins because nobody wants them. And that's the key difference.
I'm going to be honest. I have a feeling that, I don't know, I think that this current run, right at issues at 41, just goes to crap.
Oh, the IDW series?
They're all gonna be there, too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the IDW book. Its best run was between issue 1 up through issue 50 when they had their big showdown with Shredder, and then Splinter takes over the Foot Clan. It slows down tremendously
It's not
after
41.
that.
I was thinking about like leading up to City of War.
Oh, okay. That's all.
Right before you get to City of War, it just goes to a complete halt.
Yeah. So City at War started in the 90s, I think. So like number 90,
you're
91.
Right.
Yeah. And it was a pretty solid run all the way up to that. City at War, though, is one of those things where it's a lot like the Triceratops invasion, where they just stretched that plot line out to the breaking point. It's like you didn't have enough plot to get you from number 90 to number 100, the milestone issue, so you're just stringing this out as long as you can. Yeah, and that was a problem that the IDW book has always had, is that Tom Waltz, as a writer, I think is a good writer, but he doesn't really get brevity. So all of his story arcs always feel like sometimes they're 1 or 2 issues longer than they need to be, and sometimes they're like 5 issues longer than they need to be, and they just can't get to the point.
I think it was the dollar bin. Just put it out there.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Some IDW books, like their miniseries that nobody wants, like the April and Casey miniseries by Mariko Tamaki. Like I see that in dollar bins all the time. Nobody wants that crap. But meanwhile, once you actually get into the issues that I guess people are savvy enough to understand are worth something, like in the 90s or whatever, even going back to like the early issues, I found that like issue 1 of IDW's Ninja Turtle books, that goes for a lot of money. When that had a pretty big print run, I'd have to look up the exact number, but it wasn't a rare comic. It had 5 variant covers out the gate. I think 6 actually, because one of them was an Eastman cover. It had the 4 turtle interlocking cover. It was like X-Men #1. We had like the interlocking covers, the gatefold cover that had all of them combined, and then it had some like one-off variant covers. Like there's like several 100,000 copies of that out there in the wild for people to find. But because it's IDW TMNT #1, you're not going to find it for a reasonable price, even though it's not rare. But once you get to like TMNT #12, and nobody gives a crap, and you can pay $1 for that.
So if you're out there, you're looking for TMNT comics, Mark's saying buyer beware. Maybe it feels like, hey, this should be worth a lot because it's TMNT number 22. You're being taken for a ride. It's not a rare comic.
Exactly, and it's one of those things where it's a rock and a hard place right now. Like, do you want to pay those gouged prices right now for them, or do you want to wait and see if the bubble leaks and you can pick it up for a more reasonable price a few years later? Could be that the prices never go down, and then they'll only go up, and all of a sudden you're not going to be able to get your book affordably ever again. So,
I imagine that's the case on issue 1, probably through issue 5.
Yeah,
those prices are probably locked in, but I think.
But like the fourth printings,
there's going to be a bubble bursting somewhat soon.
There is. I think if you're looking for #1s and you don't really care about print runs, pay a reasonable price for like the 4th and 5th printings of TMNT #1, and 2 and 3, etc. Don't let someone try to swindle you and charge you like $70 for like the 4th printing of TMNT #1. It's not worth that. And eventually, I think you're going to find someone who's selling it for at least an honest price.
Yeah, we do think there's some softening in the market. Obviously, we will have talked about that already on Slabbed and Raw Monday. Mark, thanks so much for coming on here. Talk about a little bit of the price fluctuations happening with the Mirage and Archie and some of the other TMNT series that you see.
I mean, that's the weird thing. Turtles are hot. It's not affecting other books as much as it's affecting Turtles specifically right now. So this is more of a warning call to all the Turtle fans out there who have been postponing completing their collections. If you don't do it now, you may regret it in your wallet in the future.
I think you should wait it out.
We'll see.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.